cosmos in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
Illustrate.
We have the power to decide the fate of our planet and ourselves. This is a time of great danger, but our species is young and curious and brave. It shows much promise. In the last few millennia, we have made the most astonishing and unexpected discoveries about the cosmos and our place within it. I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand this cosmos in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
Yeah, so who wouldn't want to be a scientist to this or that when they're 12 years old? You know? So I think the best way to illustrate these occasional incompatibilities is to first define what science is. Now, this is not easy in a historical context because, to put it bluntly, vast amounts of drivel have been written about the subject by armies of postmodernist philosophers and journalists. But I'm going to ignore all this because I concur absolutely with a quote attributed to the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. He said, "The philosophy of science is about as useful to scientists as ornithology is to birds." To my mind, science is very simple indeed. Science is the best framework we have for understanding the universe. Now, as long as you accept that evidence is more important than opinion, then this is a statement of the obvious. See, everything we take for granted in the modern world, from atoms to electricity, from our understanding of the stars to medical imaging, is down to somebody being curious about the universe and using the scientific method to investigate it. The great English biologist Thomas Huxley summarised it beautifully. Science is simply common sense at its best. That is, rigidly accurate in observation and merciless to fallacy in logic. Now, there was no better practitioner of clarity of thought and explanation than Richard Feynman, who, as well as being dismissive of philosophy when it wandered into the scientific arena, was simultaneously and perhaps uniquely one of the greatest scientists and the greatest communicators of the second half of the 20th century. Here is his description of the simple power of the scientific method, taken from his Messenger lectures, recorded by the BBC in 1964.
I'm going to discuss how we would look for a new law. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we no, don't laugh, that's really true. Then we compute the consequences of the guess to see what, if this is right, if this law that we guessed is right, we see what it would imply, and then we compare those computation results to nature, or we say compare to experiment or experience, compare it directly with observation to see if it works. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. I shouldn't do impressions. But that's all there is to it. Here is our first point of potential friction in science program making and reporting. Feynman alluded to it by saying it doesn't matter what his name is. Authority, for that matter, the number of people who believe something to be true, count for nothing. There are simply statements that are in accord with our observation of nature and statements that are not. Now, how should this rather absolutist sounding position be reflected in television? Because, you see, television doesn't have the same aims as science. Science is simply the process by which we seek to understand nature. It is utterly a-populist. Its findings respect no social or political norms or religious beliefs. In other words, when it comes to the practice of science, the scientist must never have an eye on the audience, for that would be to fatally compromise the process. Now, contrast that with television. There are customers, viewers, reviewers, consumers. So television must reflect, to an extent, the majority and minority views of the population. But what if the majority of the population doesn't share the scientific view? What if the findings of science run contrary to deeply held beliefs? What if the accepted scientific position might offend some viewers? Let me give two examples, one of which is trivial and doesn't matter at all, and one that matters a great deal. The first comes from my own series, Wonders of the Solar System, in which an offhand but factually correct comment about astrology triggered a bit of a spat between myself, some of our more mystical viewers, and the BBC.